I am sitting here talking to Andy Vitale. It has been a minute since we did our initial podcast record. Andy, welcome back, and it's good to see you again.
Hey, same here, Ryan. Yeah, it's been a minute, but we talked about something in the podcast and some developments have changed and just wanted to come back and be able to share that.
Yeah, let's do it. I know things have changed, so why don't you give us the update?
Yeah, so when we recorded, I was looking for a new role, but I had mentioned that, hey, like I'm really close to announcing something. And since then, literally 10 days later, I took on a role leading design at a company called Taxwell. Taxwell is a leading digital platform that supports over 90,000 tax professionals and 3 million do-it-yourself filers through two different brands, Drake Software and TaxAct. And together it powers tens of millions of federal and state returns annually. And as I've been digging in through like tax season and going into thinking about next year, it's been a really interesting opportunity to see how we can start to simplify something that feels so complex to everyone that has to, file taxes.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Thanks.
It sounds really exciting.
Yeah, super, super excited to maybe come back again in the future and share some of the things we've been doing.
I love that. Let's definitely set that up.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, Andy, thanks a lot. And I am excited now to get into the episode.
People are the best part of the equation, right? Look at your team like you would the work that you put out. They become part of your portfolio. And them going on to do great things and even greater things than you have is just like, it's so rewarding to see.
Welcome to That Pivotal Moment of Change, the podcast about the career stories that shape who we become. Wins, stumbles, tough calls. We get into all of it. If you're ready to grow, level up, or take a bold leap, you're in the right place. Quick ask, if you're getting value from the show, hit follow. It helps us grow and lets us know what's working. Today we welcome Andy Vitale.
Hey, Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
Same. I'm looking forward to it. Glad that you're here. I'm going to kick us off and get started here. Can you talk about your background and how you got into design work?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got into design like anyone else by mistake. Right. It was a little bit more intentional than I make it sound, but ultimately, my first time in school was for TV and radio. And I ended up spending a lot more time at the radio station than in the classroom and had a couple of interesting guests. And through one of my guests, who was a professional wrestler, dropped out of school for TV and radio and learned to wrestle professionally. I was at Brooklyn College at the time in New York, and I decided, hey, let's try this. So learned enough to make the person I was wrestling look good, got to travel around a little bit, moved to Florida because there were no state taxes, and realized after a few years that I wasn't going to make a living doing this, right? I'm not like 6'5", I'm not 270 pounds shredded, just not the right role for me, and decided I needed to go back to school and wanted to do something for computers. And at the time, the two options at the school by my house were computer graphic design or computer networking. And I didn't see myself crawling through ceilings and under floors running cables. So I thought design would be a good fit. And, having done wrestling, being creative and played sports and learned about like feedback from people and people's reactions, understanding how that translates to design, which we can tie a lot better together today than in the moment, but ultimately did that. One of my first jobs when I graduated, maybe a year in, was for the tabloids, all of the trash magazines, Sun, Star, Inquirer, Weekly World News. We were subject of the first anthrax attack in the United States. So back in 2001, they were mailing anthrax to politicians and news stations. And actually, I guess we were the test run. Our photo editor received a letter in the mail, a picture of J-Lo, a soapy substance. He opened it, and a few days later, he died. And I remember, getting a call to go down to the health department. Actually, it was a hotel ballroom in Delray Beach, Florida, where the FBI, the CDC, the Florida Department of Health talked to us and explained like how they were going to treat this and what it looked like. And the company said, hey, we're going to move all of our servers and equipment to another office. Like, are you ready to come back? And it's like, absolutely not. I'm not going back to this company where I almost died. It was found in like 2,000 spots of the building. So, I mean, I didn't end up with anthrax. So still the stress that came with it and the anxiety every time you'd hear like the alert tone on the news and find out another coworker was hospitalized was wild. So I reached out to the school that I graduated from and asked if they had teaching opportunities, and they did. It was an hour and a half from my house though, each way for campus. And I taught day and night classes. So in between, I needed to do something to keep myself busy. And this was a time where emerging disciplines of UX were coming into play: content strategy, information architecture, interaction design. And I started to teach them to myself and eventually teaching them to my students. And, when you teach something, you have to really know it because people ask questions. So I had to really like learn it, teach it, learned it more by teaching it. And then after a few years of helping them transition from a career college to a college to university, I wanted to go back out in the field and practice it. And I did. So that's the long, like roundabout story of like my entry into what I do today.
That is an amazing story on several different levels. The anthrax piece, crazy.
Wild, yeah.
Can imagine how stressful that must have been going through it. I do want to go back to the wrestling piece.
Sure.
That is, I think, one of my all-time favorite transitions to get into design. And I've talked to a lot of people, both on the podcast and out of the podcast, but wrestling to design, that's pretty awesome. And I really love that, you kind of talked about, okay, there are some parallels. I love how you found parallels from wrestling to design. I find that when you really think about it, somebody who's pivoting careers or looking to get into design, there's always some type of parallel there if you look for it. And I think it's really important to find that. So,
right.
What was life like as a wrestler?
So, wrestling in very small auditoriums, high school gymnasiums, VFW halls, in front of sometimes 5 people, sometimes a few hundred, driving a lot, driving from like Brooklyn to pick up a ring in Connecticut to then bring it to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, put it up, wrestle a match under a mask, and then do a battle royal and then do another match and take the ring down. And at the end of the night, have the promoter say, hey, you know what? Like, here's a hot dog and like $5 for gas. Now take the ring back to Connecticut and, see you next week. So it was a lot of that. It was a lot of not glamorous like you see and think. It's people that are hungry, people that have been around for a long time, people who it's a side hustle for or a hobby. It's just an interesting like group of people, and there's a code and there's paying your dues, and to this day that still exists. I'm sure it's a little bit different as it's become more mainstream and more protected from a like health perspective, but really just being on the road, right? Just spending some time trying to entertain some people, try to have fun.
Were there any lessons you learned during that time that have carried through or been helpful for you today?
I think a lesson that I learned is to be able to read the audience, right? And be able to change what you're doing based on an audience reaction. I learned how to tell stories. You're telling physical stories, but in design now you're telling stories through design work and still tying them to like keeping a story arc together. The other thing I learned is to really like, when you're new somewhere, make sure you're doing a lot more listening than you're doing talking, but ask questions because people aren't going to just give you the answers. You have to ask to understand and seek to understand.
That's great. And I never really thought of that from the standpoint of storytelling. And then you said it and I'm like, wow, that just makes a ton of sense, how that could be a good lesson learned and relevant. And yeah, the point on asking questions and taking your time, so important.
Yep, for sure.
You have spent time at some really cool brands. I know you have done a lot of, really interesting consumer facing work on the financial or fintech side. Can you talk a little bit about how each of those roles led to the next?
Really interesting journey there. So, throughout my career, I've tried to work on things that were meaningful to people. In the beginning, it was where I could learn the most and how quickly I could learn, and how I love emerging tech, right? So I wanna play there, but I've really learned to fall in love with the spaces that are most rewarding and do good for people. So, um, like I mentioned, after I was done teaching, I went to work for a company that was doing mostly print work, but we were trying to build a digital presence. Like, can you build websites for some of these customers? And I was in South Florida, and it wasn't the best design environment at the time, best design community. It was more printing club cards and flyers and things like that. So I decided that maybe design wasn't right for me. I wanted to go back to school for something that I thought would be more lucrative at the time. And I thought about nursing, and I started to go back to school for pre-nursing. And I was still working, at that print shop slash design studio. And a couple of friends of mine were like, "Hey, we're going to start an agency. Would you want to be part of this?" And I was like, "Yeah, what do I have to lose?" They said, "You have a lot of like customer facing experience, and like it could be good, it could be fun." So we started an agency, and one of our first clients were BlackBerry. And the pay for that job was like the pay that I'd always wished that I had gotten in the first few years of my career. And I was like, all right, I'm hooked. And then working with people that were like hungry and looking for work and looking to do great work. It was South Florida. So a lot of the work that we started didn't come into fruition. It was a little bit shady. We worked on spec work and have bad deals with customers. So at some point we ended up closing the agency, and then I went to Office Depot. And Office Depot was a great time for me to be there because I was the only mobile designer. And it was a time when mobile was really becoming the thing that it is today. So all of the things we use today, guest registration, social login, in-store pickup, right? PayPal integrations, those we were big enough to be one of the first companies doing that. I got to work directly with Apple on the launch of Passbook, which is Apple Wallet now. And like that was just great. I worked on their Black Friday experience. I worked on an augmented reality piece with the band One Direction while I was there. My wife was working at a property management firm, and she slipped and fell and broke her foot clean in half and had 2 surgeries in Florida and needed to have another surgery. So we sought out the foot and ankle doctor from the NFL to do the surgery for her, and they were based in Charlotte. So we decided to pack up, and I left Office Depot, and I took a job with a company called Belk in Charlotte. They're a department store. So similar work, e-commerce space. But I was hired to work on a replatform, and I remember that Black Friday, the Belk site went down, and the Office Depot app that I worked on was named one of the best functioning Black Friday experiences. So that was a little disheartening. And we transitioned my Belk experience to like, what can we do for replatform out of the box, focus on the new platform that we have, really start to work on loyalty programs and coupons, but it wasn't what I was hired to do. So I ended up leaving and going to 3M. 3M, I was the second UX designer at 3M. I was focused on healthcare, a lot of interface work for medical devices. But then I found out they had an enterprise software, health information systems division. Got to work on a pilot project there, showed great productivity increases, ended up working on their flagship software, getting the first multidisciplinary team at 3M. So having research and front-end engineering and visual design and interaction designers all focused on this software that focused on quality of care improvements, but early days of AI through natural language processing and auto-suggested coding. So focusing on quality of care through length of stay and how doctors and nurses communicate. And then worked on a really cool population health software where we partnered with Verily, Google's life sciences division, showed a lot of cost savings and quality of care savings there. Left there, went to Polaris, got to work on a couple of cool, like help me choose features, conversational onboarding, a couple of new migrations, left there, went to Truist. Well, actually, SunTrust was the first head of experience design for that bank. And then they had the largest banking merger since the 2008 financial collapse with BB&T to form Truist. Stood up a lot of new design disciplines there. Ended up going to Rocket, scaling that team from 40 to 174, working through really like launching a rewards program, the acquisition of Truebill and the rebrand of them for Rocket Money, introducing conversational design that did billions of dollars in closed loans. Like when I was there, the industry was really good. And if you look at their financials, they were doing about $351 billion in closed loans. The best year that I was there. And that's high volume. Ended up leaving Rocket, going to a company called Constant Contact, a digital marketing company, to help them modernize their product, introduce AI features, really start to think about like the first time user experience and how to get customers to use key features a little bit more. And, there we are.
One of the things that stood out really quickly, talking about some of the work you did at Office Depot and early on mobile and e-commerce and some of the integrations you worked on, was just being able to work on some very strategic, cutting edge type of things very early on, which I'm sure was very helpful in terms of carrying you through to each role.
Yeah, for sure. I think, back then too, what was different is when you were early in your career, people were more willing to help. They knew that you wouldn't have all of the answers, and they would mentor you and they would guide you and they'd show you shortcuts and explain things to you. And I think we've lost a little bit of that along the way. I think we expect emerging designers newer in their career to just hit the ground running and just like, hey, here's a project, go tackle it, right? And I think back then I was fortunate to work with a lot of people that really helped me grow as a designer.
It's a great point. And I think I was fortunate in that regard too. I think I worked with some people early on who were just great managers or great mentors to work with or alongside. So I think that's a really good point. And I do agree. I think that's not always there. Just the idea of mentorship and asking for help.
Right.
It's incredibly important. Be curious, ask questions, and find people who have been doing it for a while and try to contact them, even if it's, I'll get messages on LinkedIn sometimes from people who are younger in their career, and I think they're probably just browsing around and somehow randomly have stumbled across me, but I always hop on the phone.
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone to help me in that type of way, and I just feel like it's a nice way to give back, and I also really appreciate that somebody actually took the initiative to send that message.
I agree. I reply to every message. I think about the time, and it's funny because I know we're going to talk about like a significant influence or moment for me. And I saw Mike Montero speak at an event apart in San Diego, and I was just inspired by his message about like, this was probably the like how designers destroy the world or something like that. And I remember getting a job and reaching out to Mike and saying, hey, I saw your talk and it inspired me. And I got up and I changed jobs and I got this new job. And he replied on LinkedIn. He's like, no, man, that's all you. All I did was say some words. He's like, you went ahead and did the hard work and did this thing. And I was like, wow, like that was so impactful to me at that moment, to be able to have someone, that seemed unattainable in the industry to just respond to me. And that's why I respond to every message that I get.
Really happy that you do it. And hopefully anyone listening out there who are trying to figure something out, LinkedIn, there's so many good tools out there just to search around and find people who might be interesting and send a message. The worst thing that happens is somebody doesn't respond.
Right.
It's kind of like it didn't happen. And if they do respond, then awesome.
Right. And if they don't respond, it's not because they're looking at it and saying, I'm not responding to this. Like it's probably hundreds of messages buried and it might take 6 months for them to respond, or in a tab they didn't realize was there. So don't take it personal.
The worst thing is not doing it.
Right.
It's been a tough time for many in the tech space with reductions. And unfortunately, I know you've been through that. Just, can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Over the last 2 roles, I've seen a couple of things really impactful in that way. So business realities had forced a reduction in team size as interest rates went up at my last company before my most recent. And then my most recent one ended in January. And it's just a reality of where we're at, right? I think this was the first time in my career that I didn't have the next thing lined up. And at first I was like, I don't know what I'll do. I have a strong network, and realizing, wow, like having a little bit of time is actually good. It was a good like physical and mental health reset. Like I've gone back to the gym, I'm eating better, right? All the things that you don't do when you're traveling so much for work, because I was traveling a lot. But this market is different. It feels like the years of the pandemic kind of never happened. It's like return to office is like we never worked remotely, or like salaries and titles may feel a little bit different than they did in the last couple of years. And AI is prevalent, right? I think much like anyone else, I've been ghosted. I've been auto rejected for roles. I had an interview with an AI bot. I had roles get canceled in progress. I've seen roles that pay like way less than I would have expected. Had a referral from someone who was leaving, and then as soon as they left, that role ended. I had the tariffs come up as a solution. I had startups offer me interesting work, but not yet have the funding for it. It's just been interesting. But I think like for me, I've kept busy through meeting people. And again, at a certain level, there are recruiters. So I've been working with a lot of executive recruiters, and they've been really helpful. And I've had a lot of really good conversations. So really happy to be able to announce something soon. But it's been 2 months, and here we are. So I think for me, I'm fortunate that the market is also picking up. That's what a lot of people have said. But the thing about that is some people are out of work for a really long time. And I think for them, it really is about finding those connections, the people that work at those companies. Everyone I've talked to, they said the same thing, right? It's not you, it's the market right now. But there's a hard way to balance believing in yourself and that fear of unemployment. There's a big emphasis on craft, but what does craft actually mean? And there's just, I think we're at this inflection point as an industry. We're reading all about it. How do we leverage AI? What is the intersection with design and product and engineering, and what does that look like? And how do we come out of this? But I really think that like the market is moving in the right direction. I believe that design is best positioned to navigate this AI emergence or surge of AI. I think right now it's not yet realized it's a tool, and it's seen as a technology that we're applying to a lot of places. And at some point, we're going to have to make sure it delivers on human outcomes and human promises. So I think we're in a good spot. I think if you're losing a job now, it's a lot different now than it was a year and a half ago. So just make sure you're reaching out to people, work that network, get to know people, and good luck with it. But I really think it will be okay.
It's encouraging, and really like the positive outlook you have on it there. And again, there's that through line of networking and talking to people, and not just relying on, I saw something on LinkedIn or another site, I'm just going to submit to it. I think, you're spot on there with talking to other people and not being afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten so many, just through conversations, so many people have offered to introduce me to someone. If you're lucky, it's the first level connection that will help you, but most of the time it's a second and third level connection that actually moves the needle for you. I've been introduced to a lot of different recruiters and different roles, so I appreciate that. Everyone that's helped me has gone out of their way, and I feel great about that.
This next question that I'm going to ask you is somewhat related. I know last time we talked, you were speaking about fractional design, which I think has become a bigger thing, probably over the past year or two, I would assume, maybe more than that. Can you talk about your experience with fractional work or what you're seeing out in the market with fractional?
I think that fractional work is kind of the guise for consulting, right? I think there are some people that really do make a living doing fractional leadership work, fractional support. I found it interesting where companies are like, I don't want you working for us and 3 other companies at the same time. So, fractional feels more like what we would call like a shorter term consulting gig, helping somebody while someone's out of office or helping someone until they fill a role because they need to keep things moving. I've seen it work really well from a product perspective. I've worked with some fractional product leaders. I'm seeing a few fractional design leaders that I know have work. Um, and I think that there's a whole group of people that do it for marketing, but it sounds, I don't know. It was one of those things that, like, if you've got a good network, if you've got a way to get work, then it's probably a good thing for you. But if that's not your thing, like, don't expect people to come knocking on your door because you listed yourself as being a fractional leader or open for fractional work. I just think that if you think the work's going to come to you, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, good point. And I do think it's an interesting concept, but agree with your point where it is, I understand where you're going with the consulting piece.
I guess the difference is you're literally a person of one coming into a company to do work for them, as opposed to and doing work with their team, as opposed to just like bringing in a whole team to do a body of work and embed with them. But yeah, it's very similar.
What are some key lessons you've learned throughout your career?
I think one of the lessons that I've learned is maturity of design, or the maturity of design is really dependent on the maturity of the organization and the maturity of the organization to understand design. I think if you start to mature design and design culture too fast, it starts to become exclusive. It starts to feel like you're not including your product partners or your engineering partners. And it ends up starting to feel a little bit like a cool kids club. And while that's great for the designers, it's not great for the reputation of design in the organization. Another lesson I've learned is to really speak through the value of metrics and to not feel like design doesn't own the metrics when they're a contributor to the work. Our product partners are very openly saying, hey, we've increased conversion by 44%, or we've reduced the bounce rate by 78%. And it's like, I don't see a lot of designers still talking about things that way. And I think it's really important that we measure the impact of the business, not just call out like our SUS score, where people are like, well, I don't know what that means, and I don't really know how you measure that. So those are some key lessons. I think I've also learned to ask a lot of questions and be curious. And the importance of relationships, right? We don't build products alone. And you have to get to know people and what motivates them, both on your team and who you work with, so that you can actually do work with them and get to know them and have fun. And it becomes more than just a business transaction.
All great points, everything you just said. The measuring value of design, I think, is really interesting. There's a lot of talk in the industry about that. From what I've seen, it's a difficult thing to do, and something I don't know that designers have really cracked across the board. It's easy to look at a product and say, this is how the product is performing. And as a design and research team, you've certainly had a lot to do with that. But to look at it and say, okay, here's how you can really measure our impact, it's a tricky thing.
Yeah, I think design should really try not to focus on the value that design brings by itself, but talk through the value that it brings as a collective, because design is a team sport. It's collaborative, and we share the successes and the learnings together. So we should be proud to speak of those the same way. Plus, if I'm an executive, if I'm your CFO or CEO or anyone, and I'm hearing, hey, sales are up 40% this month, or conversions up 18%, right? I don't want to hear 5 different versions of that metric that are kind of different from all of the different teams, where sales is like, well, we increased this by 84%. And the product's like, well, we increased this by 12%. And, how do you start to speak the same language and the same outcome and impact across the board? So it's not like, how do I wrap my head around this? I just want to know how the needle was moved for the business.
One thing I've noticed throughout the years, when internally, and maybe it's executives or various stakeholders are talking about the success of a product or something that they worked on, and they're showing it, and they're talking about maybe the technology or some of the product work that went into it, and not necessarily pointing out specifically the design team or the UX or their research. I kind of look at that from a standpoint of you're actually showing, like, what you're showing on the screen and talking about how it's put together. You're actually showing the output of what the design team did, which I think in some cases makes people think I don't actually have to talk about, because you're looking at it. And I think from the standpoint of the team that worked on it, as a designer, you're a huge part of the success of that product. And I agree with you. It's a team sport, and it's collaborative, and the end product is there because of how a team worked together.
Right.
What are some of the bigger challenges you faced in your career, and how did you overcome those challenges?
When I think about challenges, I look at, like, where did I learn the most? What has happened that has really, like, changed who I've become as a designer? I think going into the healthcare space was really interesting to me. It was very complex, a lot of things that I had to learn and get up to speed quickly. And the stakes were higher than I've ever worked, because it's life or death in some situations, right? When you're working on medical devices, things that measure the cleanliness of medical devices, like, that could cause infections, and right. So having to just have a conversation with a chief medical officer, right, for the first time, and how do you show up? I think being put in uncomfortable situations have been the biggest challenges, because they take me out of my comfort zone. But I've learned to really enjoy that and embrace that, and try to look at things with a growth and learning mindset. Some of the challenges are like, what do you do when a business isn't moving in the direction that you anticipated? That could be outside forces, it could be your own doing, but it's just, how do you get the team excited around that? People are always a big challenge, because people are so unpredictable, and people are people, and emotions come into play. So, the first time you're having to let somebody go or have that difficult conversation, like, those are huge challenges in the moment that you then move past. We're facing the biggest challenge that we have now. I really believe that we are entering a trend, a transition to where product design and engineering potentially could be moving past being separate disciplines, but being more competencies in what I'm starting to call, like, the full stack builder. And I think that, like, leveraging emerging technology and AI to do some of this work, how do you move past a challenge of what feels unknown or ambiguous to you, and start to learn these new capabilities to add tools to your toolbox? That, to me, is the challenge that we're facing right now as an industry.
And I have a feeling some of that stream of thought is going to come up when I ask you about the future of design.
Perfect.
I really do think you're on to something there. So we're going to come to that in a little bit. You mentioned something during that I did want to ask you about, and that's stepping out of your comfort zone, which is incredibly important yet incredibly difficult. So do you have any tips or advice or anything that you've thought of just to think about how you might be able to step out of your comfort zone?
I speak a lot. And the reason that I decided to speak at conferences is because I was very uncomfortable to do it. And there are times where it's still very uncomfortable to me, which is why I keep doing it. Getting up there and feeling like someone's going to challenge what you're saying because they have a different opinion, which never happens, right? I think that goes to how I handle a lot of uncomfortable conversations. I had a fantastic boss at Rocket who went on to be an executive coach. And then I worked with another executive coach in the company. And one of the things that they worked with me on was like my mindset coming into conversations and how I could trust my instincts more rather than trying to play out a conversation in my head 50 different ways to figure out how to react to something if something comes up, because all I'm thinking about are edge cases. And at the same time, I'm also really good at it's not a strength, but one of the things I do is I replay conversations after they happen in my head, like, oh, I can't believe I said that. I should have said this differently. Like, but no one else thinks about that. Like the conversation's over and people aren't so focused on like you or wanting you to fail. And, because of that, I've learned to like really understand that people have positive intent and to not get hung up on what has already happened, because it's happened and there's not much you can do other than, if it's something you would do differently, learn so that the next time you do it differently, but don't beat yourself up over it. Like chances are people forgot about it.
I can totally relate to what you're saying about replaying those conversations. And here's something I should have said differently. Every week I look back at what happened during that week and in meetings and during one-on-ones, and I'm like, I wish I would have said this, or I wish I would have asked that question. And this is not beating yourself up about it. It's just realizing, okay, it's a good thing to think about, and it's
Right.
okay to kind of reinforce those things. And maybe next time you'll think of the right thing because you just kind of had that moment. And I appreciate what you were saying on the speaking piece. That's something that I wanted to also ask you about, because I know you do a lot of speaking and a lot of thought leadership. And I love that you got into that as a way of stepping outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, it felt like a thing that I wanted to do at the time to just promote the work that I was working on, right? I think there was an opportunity to contribute to a design industry that's been really good to me over the years, right? So how can I share my experiences? And then it's turned into, how can I share the work that my company's doing or my team is doing to get people excited about maybe coming to work with us and be part of the journey with us. And now it's moving back to, even through my teaching, of like, how do I really give back? If I can prevent somebody from making a mistake that I made, just by thinking about something slightly differently for a minute, because obviously you can't copy the same playbook, then to me, that's a win. Like if someone walks away with one thing where they're like, all right, I'm going to think about something a little bit differently because of something you said, like that's the most important thing to me.
It's a challenging thing to do. And I think, if somebody goes to a conference or they, join something online and somebody's up there presenting, there's a lot that goes into that. And I almost look at it as golf. I am not a golfer.
Same.
At all. I've tried to play golf a few times and I probably did nothing but annoy anyone who was trying to come behind us. But I think about that because it's one of those things people always say, golf is just, you can keep on doing it and keep on doing it, right? And it's just, it's hard to get better, right? To, really get to that point. I think speaking and presenting, same thing. Coming up with content that is unique and engaging, and then being able to stand on a stage alone and deliver that message. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Half the time there's a monitor that goes down or a technology challenge, and you're like, oh, I can't even see what slide I'm on, or there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know. So make sure that, you're supportive of people that are on a stage.
The first time that I had to give a presentation, I was working for a company and there was a speaking slot at a conference and they had to fill it and they needed to do something design related. So it came to me. It's not that I was even looking to do it and I was nervous as shit. It was just one of those things, but I got up there to do it. There was a lot of people in the room and the slides didn't match what was on the speaker notes. And it was and it was horrible. But I also think that's what made me interested in keeping doing it. It was like, wow, that didn't go well. And now I want to start doing this more.
Yeah. Some of my early ones were really bad. And I still to this day have dreams where like I'm on stage and I'm trying to find my file and I can't find it. And like 20 minutes go by, 30 minutes go by, and everyone's just watching me search for this like Keynote file that I'm going to open, or Figma slides now, which thankfully those are easy to find. So maybe I don't have to worry about that nightmare anymore.
Oh, hilarious. What specific skills or mindsets have been crucial in navigating your career twists and turns?
I think for me, it's been a like curiosity, but also wanting to do things differently. I think I've learned that the things that I know the least about are most interesting to me. Whenever I've taken a role, it's always been something that like you learn about it through the process, but originally I wouldn't have known a lot about that company or that brand or that thing. And you just get immersed in it, and this like growth mindset has been crucial for that. Um, I like to build things. I like to work with people. I like to level up teams and develop people and help people do their best work. And kind of maybe that servant leadership for my teams have really been crucial too in navigating that. And also a relentless work ethic. Like I get up early. I go to bed early, but I get up early and I work. Like I even early in my career, I would say, like, I may not be the best designer on this team, but I will put in the work to put out the best design on this team. And that drive and that passion has been something that's been really helpful to me throughout.
Yeah, that's great. I love that with the drive and the hustle and the determination. In hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently?
The thing I would do differently is have understood the value of patience a little bit earlier. I think, early in my career when I was looking to grow and develop and advance my career, getting frustrated over things like not working on a project that, I wanted to work on that may not have been as valuable, or not getting a promotion right away, thinking about like, do I have to go to a different place to move up in my career? Do I have to explore other opportunities? I remember I left one role like a week before my 401k vested, right? Just because, I was there for 3 years, but I could have waited. I think when you're newer in the field, you want to make change. What I've learned, I think too, in hindsight, is change happens from within. It's really easy for someone to say, hey, don't work at that company. They're not ethical, right? But if you really want to turn that company around, you heard that all the time about Facebook, right? People would talk about that for years. You'd go to conferences and that would be like, if you're working for this company or that company, the best thing you could do, you hear that now about Twitter, right? If it, is just leave. But if you really want to make change, you've got to stay there and make the change and be the change that you want.
I love that. And I could not agree with that piece more. I want to ask you another question here. And I think this is going to circle back to what you were talking about earlier. But what do you think the future of design looks like?
The future to me is very bright, right? I think we continue to focus on human outcomes. I think there's a new opportunity for us at play. We always talked about, how technology allows us to provide outcomes to people. So now that we're playing with a new emerging tech in AI, and it's moving at a faster pace than a lot of other tech that we've seen, we know the mistakes that have been made without understanding the limitations of technology and the harm that it can cause and the inequity that it can cause. And I think we have a good opportunity to make sure that we're applying AI to the right human outcomes. I think that's part of the future. I think, I talked about being like a full stack builder. I think we've got to get back into like that builder mindset. We've got to, early days of the web, if you talk to people that were around in those early days of mobile apps, it was very much like a sense of play. And we have that opportunity again. The stakes are a little bit higher, right? Like a mobile app wasn't going to didn't have the capability of causing the same harm that AI does. But there's still that opportunity to play and learn so that you understand the capabilities and the limitations. I think, service design. making sure that we're thinking about things across all touch points, end to end, right? Systems thinking. These are things we've talked about for years, but we've seen them as separate disciplines. I think we're looking at a little bit more of a rise of the generalist again, too. I think this industry will pivot. It will, everything is cyclical. And I think that we're just at a place now where in some companies, design is still seen as very strategic, and in other places, it's a delivery arm of an organization. And I think we just need to look at how to best leverage what we're capable of doing in the environment that we're in. And, that's going to come in many shapes and sizes, but I think ultimately there's just a lot of opportunity for us.
I think you said a lot of really good and interesting things there. And I just took a note where you mentioned design as service, or delivery or more strategic partner. I would love to catch up with you again on that sometime. I think there's just really interesting conversation because I think there's been
For
a
sure.
lot of changes in the movement in the industry on that one. What advice would you give to someone earlier in their career who are still trying to figure things out? And what advice would you give to a more seasoned leader?
So for someone earlier in their career, it goes back to like being curious, starting to build your network, trying to find ways to provide value to the design community. The design community is wonderful and full of teachings and learnings. And while there are pockets of not great like anywhere else, there's a lot more good than bad. So definitely spend some time investing in getting to know people. Your network will be there for you when you need them, for sure. For someone more senior in their career, don't stop learning. There is so much learning that you can do, and you learn so much from the people on your team. Like, I love when we've got interns. Not only do I get to know them and get to see that like fresh perspective that they have on things and learn like new music and new shows that people are watching, but I also like just having to teach them and learn how they operate. And sometimes you're teaching them to be like people, right? Sometimes they've never done certain things. They haven't lived certain parts of their life yet. So it's just so back to like why I teach. You just learn when you teach, and there's so many opportunities there. So look for maybe opportunities to learn that you wouldn't think were so, clear of a learning opportunity, but also keep growing your skill set and invest in people. People are the best part of the equation, right? Look at your team like you would the work that you put out. They become part of your portfolio, and them going on to do great things and even greater things than you have is just like, it's so rewarding to see.
Amazing piece there on people, and could not agree with you more. I feel like if there's one thing you're going to over-index on, it's people on your team.
Right.
I love that. What is your favorite quote?
There's a musician that a lot of people probably have never heard of called Nikki Heaton. And she put out an album that's amazing, that's very different than most of the music that I listen to. But she's got one quote in this song that says, "Over trembling floors I'm steady. They've written my death already." And, for me, that's been one of those things that I've been good at in my career, is when there's ambiguity, when there's complexity, when there's uncertainty, I'm good at handling that. I'm at least good at presenting how I handle that and creating that like safe space and comfort and confidence for others. So that quote is just, when I heard that, I'm like, that feels like me. So
There is a lot of really good content out there. What are you looking at now? And do you have anything that you would want to recommend?
I'm spending a lot of time reading people's Substacks and just getting different people's perspectives on what they're navigating. There's a couple of really interesting articles. There was, I don't have it in front of me now, but there was something, all of the CEOs of the like Fortune 100 companies did a survey on the things that are like most top of mind to them right now. And surprisingly, like they see AI as an opportunity, but it's not like business critical today. I think, the market, the new powers in office. Like those are things that are impacting business more directly, immediately. So also podcasts. I listen to podcasts when I can. I'm really digging into Lenny's podcast I like to get outside perspectives on design and on other industries to see if they are similar to the ones that we have in our industry. And that one's just really well with a lot of good product leaders and good conversation. And it's really good to keep up on other disciplines. So I'm enjoying that a lot.
Lenny's podcast is great, and the newsletter is pretty awesome too. So he's doing some great things. Lastly, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm my name, Andy Vitale, all over every social media. Even if I'm not active on it, I have the name so no one else has it. But most likely LinkedIn's your best bet. I'm on there more often than not. So if you need to reach out to me, please do. Like if you have questions, if there's anything that I can help with, I'm happy to. But LinkedIn's the number one spot.
Andy, thank you so much for taking time and doing this today. I really appreciate the conversation. I do have that note on where we are right now as a design industry, so I'd love to follow up with you on that. But
awesome.
Thank you for being here. I think this is a good one, and I'm excited to get this out there.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I had so much fun.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our content today, please like, subscribe, and comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.